Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the sweeping, multi-generational saga of the Gamian Empire. We're talking about a story that literally transforms a shattered childhood into a massive, continent-spanning engine of conquest. But, to really grasp the sheer scale of this history, we've got to start at the very beginning. And that beginning? It's a moment of profound, world-shattering loss.
Seriously, picture this like a real cinematic masterpiece. Imagine these sweeping camera angles capturing an absolutely massive, overwhelming cavalry invasion striking a quiet farmstead right at dawn. The scale of this attack is it's terrifying. Weapons are gleaming against a sudden roaring fire, and thick, choking smoke rapidly engulfs the entire homestead as the whole world just seems to burn.
And right in the middle of this intense fire and chaos, we find a young boy, Ricardo da Gama. Dressed in the simple, homespun clothing of that ancient time, Ricardo watches helplessly as his parents, Tomas and Elara, fight desperately to protect their family. Tragically, they perish in the flames. Young Ricardo is left with absolutely nothing, forced to flee into the blackened, burning woods as his entire universe collapses around him.
So, that brings us to our first chapter. The world burns. That horrifying moment of devastation, that's the crucible. It's the exact moment a grieving orphan is set on the path to becoming a legendary revolutionary. You see, surviving the brutal, unforgiving desert markets over the next few years didn't break Ricardo. Actually, it hardened his resolve. Watching local warlords just endlessly abuse their power ignited what's known as the rebel spark. It's this deep, unshakable moral conviction that unjust power absolutely must be challenged, especially when it completely blinds itself to mercy.
Which leads us perfectly into Part 2, the Iron Enforcers.
As Ricardo comes of age and actually starts organizing a real resistance, he runs headfirst into the terrifying might of the reigning Gressarius kingdom. And the clash here isn't just physical, it's deeply philosophical. Think about these two incredibly different leaders. You've got Ricardo, whose leadership is entirely built on empathy, protecting the innocent, and sharing the burden. Then you have Prince Arriero. Arriero is all about iron discipline and a divine mandate. To him, rebellion is basically a disease, one that he cures through brutal public crucifixions. It's a complete collision of two totally incompatible worlds.
And that collision sparks Part 3, 27 brutal battles.
27. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is the staggering amount of agonizing, incredibly brutal, and, let's be honest, often losing battles that Ricardo's small, scrappy band fought against Arriero's elite, golden-armored forces. And this all happened over just a single decade. It's a testament to a level of persistence that's almost hard to wrap your head around.
When you chart out this decade of survival, the sheer scale of loss is just heartbreaking. I mean, they went from early disasters where rebels literally drowned in icy mud during the Marshlands massacre, all the way to year 24, which brought the devastating battlefield death of Ricardo's mentor, Tormi. And all of this relentless suffering just kept building, culminating in year 35 with a massive, desperate retreat after a catastrophic engagement.
Now we enter Part 4, Blood of River Placia.
Driven far to the east, with his forces completely decimated, Ricardo realizes he needs help. So he forms this epic, uneasy alliance with the fierce Cruz clan and their notoriously wild leader, Horth de Lion. But even with combined forces, the disparity at their 10th major clash, the Battle of River Placia, is horrifying. The rebels are fielding about 34,000 fighters, and we're talking mostly farmers and widows here. They are staring down an organized, highly trained tide of 85,000 elite Gressacrio forces. They are just massively, overwhelmingly outnumbered. And the battle that follows, it rages for 9 relentless days in a visceral nightmare of rain, mud, and shattered steel. It ultimately comes down to a mythic, face-to-face duel between Ricardo and Arriero. Finally, against all odds, Ricardo manages to pierce Arriero's armor. But Arriero, true to his nature, doesn't fall easily. He grabs Ricardo by the shoulder and delivers these chilling final words. Remember, a soldier dies standing. Ricardo wins, yes, but it's a deeply traumatic victory that forever changes how he views the cost of war.
Moving on to Part 5, The Chamber of Greats.
Fast forward a few decades, an elderly Ricardo has finally secured the continent. But instead of building some massive monument to his own conquests, he built something breathtakingly different, a monument to memory and conscience. Inside this chamber, he places 5 equally sized statues to honor the true pillars of Angara. Sure, he includes his fiercest allies, but what's really wild is that he also includes his bitterest enemies, like Arriero. It's his way of proving to future generations that true greatness isn't about the banner you flew under. It's about the endurance of your conscience.
Just think about the profound empathy it takes to write a dedication like this for a northern rival like Gustavo de Greserario. Ricardo honored an enemy who literally fought his own son for a decade. He recognized that, at the end of the day, both men were desperately seeking peace. They just had completely opposite philosophies on how to get there. It's such a powerful statement on unity and the shared humanity that exists even between deadly foes.
Which brings us to our final chapter, Part 6, A New Era of Conquest.
But as we know, history never really rests, does it? When Ricardo passes away, his 17-year-old grandson, Brian da Gama, inherits the throne. And wow, the kingdom's entire philosophy shifts overnight. The contrast between grandfather and grandson is honestly a little chilling. Ricardo viewed humanity as this endless circle of equals, believing peace came through empathy. Brian, he totally strips that empathy away. He looks at humanity and just sees a messy map that needs to be ordered. He believes peace only comes through relentless expansion, cold logic, and absolute control. He's dreaming of a massive, multi-continental empire.
To actually pull off this massive ambition, Brian developed something called the phalanx system. Now, this is not the passionate, scrappy rebellion of his grandfather. No, this is a cold, highly geometric, and perfectly calculated military engine. He dispatches spies to the uncharted continent of Gondwana, builds these completely impenetrable defensive lines, and launches highly agile offensive legions across the seas. Meanwhile, he leaves his home provinces under the incredibly strict bureaucratic control of 4 stewards of balance. It's literally a machine designed to swallow the world.
595. That is the number of heavily armed Gamian warships that managed to survive and break through the maelstrom, this terrifying black tide sea storm. Surviving against all odds, this massive armada brings a highly organized, devastating storm of iron and artillery to the exotic shores of Gondwana. It officially kicks off an invasion unlike anything the world has ever seen.
So as we wrap up this explainer and picture Brian's massive fleet anchoring on those foreign shores, it leaves us with one incredibly vital question. Ricardo spent his entire life bleeding to save the soul of his people from absolute rigid order. And now, his own grandson is wielding that exact same rigid order to conquer the globe. So we have to ask ourselves, does the relentless pursuit of absolute geometric order inevitably destroy the very humanity it's trying to protect? Will Brian's magnificent ambition ultimately betray the soul his grandfather fought so bitterly to save? It's a fascinating paradox to chew on. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the stories that shape our world.